I think first of all, they just came out with the latest summary of where the drought's at, and we're now over half of the U.S. counties are in drought. We're talking 2/3 of contiguous U.S. in drought, and then to bring it down to the farming side, it's pretty much covering the Corn Belt. I mean, we're talking about 83% of Nebraska, where my family farms, is in extreme or exceptional drought, the two highest categories. And we saw that some. We went along the Missouri River, where of course there was the biggest flooding in history last year, and drove down along the same boundary where we saw the flooding last year, and what we saw was dry corn. But it's hard to tell from the road, and you have to get out there. And for my family, which doesn't even do corn, which is a higher concern, but does grass, which should do better, we're already suffering the impacts in a way. We only got one cutting of hay. Our pastures are done for the year. We're feeding winter hay. And we've been in grass for over 10 years. You know, if we're having those kind of impacts, what we're seeing with corn and other crops that are much more dependent on annual rain, stuff like that, you know, the impact on them is even stronger. It's multiple. I think my biggest concern is that we don't look at it by itself, and we don't just respond to the drought, and that we look at it within the full cycle. And I mentioned the floods from last year. We had more than an entire year's rainfall in the second half of May last year in the upper Missouri River Valley. Entire year of rainfall in half a month. This spring we had record temperatures in March, heat, that helped, you know, premature budding of trees that resulted then in frost in April, killing off 97% of Michigan's tart cherry crop, killing off a huge percentage of Ontario's apple crop. So this isn't just a drought. This is erratic, volatile weather cycle that is exactly what we talked about with climate change. So I think not looking at it as pure drought, but looking at it in the overall framework of climate change and what we knew would happen, which is less water in more intense periods, coupled with this kind of erratic weather patterns. So I'd say that's one of the biggest concerns I'd have. But I'd say the second concern I have that's very strong is that we're in the middle of actually discussing the policy, the one policy that we discuss every 5 years that could be the biggest tool for addressing these needs. Yet it appears to me no one is taking that opportunity to actually put forward the kinds of policies and tools that our farmers and landowners need to meet this climate crisis. To us, it's getting back to what are rural citizens, farmers, ranchers, foresters, rural communities that are dependent on the natural resources and the land. What are they seeing out there in their different environments? We know the impacts of climate change are different in the Northwest than they are in Texas, than they are in Nebraska, than they are in the Northeast. So but we know that rural communities are all facing different challenges based on climate and based on these things actually impacting their lives today. And so what we want to do is start linking together rural organizations and leaders around the issue of climate, but really focusing on how they can both share information on what they're facing, as well as the solutions they see that will really address not just the short-term, but the long-term resiliency that they all strive to have. So for us, it's really about bringing together rural leaders to identify solutions and to put forward those solutions from a rural perspective for countering climate change.